My cat's here, so excuse me. Um, First of all, I'd like to thank Tezen Roshi Choa for the invitation, and also the Sweetwater Sangha for coming and giving me your attention for a brief while. Thank you very much for the invitation. Um, when I come a bit early to enjoy the very beginning, the chanting in the beginning, and the sitting, the zazen sitting. If you're just coming in now and you've missed the sitting, I, I, I think you might be shortchanging yourself. I think sitting individually is one of the foundations of our practice, but sitting together like this as a sangha, as a community, I think can be most powerful. And for you to have each other like this, I think is something very, very special that should be remembered and cherished. And I'm thanking you for allowing me to be a small part of that. For those of you who don't know my connection and background to Sweetwater, um, I used to live in San Diego for a while, well, for many years actually. And my connection with Sweetwater was established while incarcerated in Donovan Prison, not too far from where you folks are right now, probably, where Sweetwater is anyway. And they had volunteers, I think, coordinated out of the Sweetwater Zen Center that would come in every couple of weeks to support our practice. And I felt very fortunate to have them there. I felt like this um, sentence, that sentence, I should say, uh, was critical and crucial for me to turn my life around and to let go of addiction, which was the reason that brought me to being incarcerated multiple times. And so to uh, re engage this practice, meditation, study, with the support of Sweetwater and their affiliates, um, I would say brought me to where I am today. So I'm very grateful for what they've done and what they continue to do. And that support while there led to me returning to Detroit, as Shoa said, where my family is, to reunite with them, no longer an addict, return to college, finish my degree, and become a psychotherapist. I treat individuals. And also, I went through the seminary program here at Still Point um, to become ordained after 3 years of study. And I currently facilitate the 9 month One Sangha program for members of Still Point who, for whatever reason, decide they want to deepen their practice. I get the impression that sometimes people um, kind of get a glimpse or envision that just sitting or listening to Dharma talks on Sundays alone is not enough, that there's something else that can be gained. So the program kind of encourages people to sit on a regular basis daily. And as you probably know from previous talks, that's kind of what I say and try to encourage over and over and over again. Sit, 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 sit. Um, so that's that. If you don't mind, I'd like to start off with a reading. Uh, those of you who heard me speak before, you've seen me read this before. It's just a little booklet um, called the Sin Sin Ming. Just going to read a brief passage from us to kind of from it to just get us started. If you wish to move in the one way, do not dislike the worlds of senses and ideas. Indeed, to embrace them fully is identical with true enlightenment, with a capital E. The wise person attaches to no goals, but the foolish person fetters himself or herself. There is one Dharma without differentiation. Distinctions arise from the clinging needs of the ignorant. To seek mind with the discriminating mind is the greatest of mistakes. So, I am not a Buddhist historian or a scholar. However, every once in a while, I like to return to some of the readings, some of our history, this tradition, Buddhist tradition, uh, kind of to get refreshed. I'm thinking also at when I go back to some passages, I get different things from them at different points in my life. So I wanted to share one of my favorites a bit later. And I wanted to start off by saying that the Buddha, uh, before he reached enlightenment, was a prince, a wealthy prince. You probably already know most of this. And as a fairly young adult, he decided to leave his family, leave the royal luxury, the wealth and privilege behind to become a spiritual seeker looking for an answer to, I guess you could say, what does it mean to be alive? There must be more to it than just excess. I'm imagining that he was thinking to himself. And perhaps he had a few glimpses of some misery and wondered what that was about, if there was an answer to understanding that. So he became a spiritual seeker, a wanderer. As I understand it, he visited several teachers over the years, studying with them for a while, mastering what they taught, and then moving on to the next teacher. At some point, several years later, he was practicing with a group of 5 ascetics. Um, I guess they had a routine of denying the body. Uh, there are some then and now that believe that if excess is not the answer, then perhaps the exact extreme opposite of denying the body, sleep, proper nourishment, comforts, one could kind of gain some sort of insight and discover with one's mind what there was to see as a spiritual seeker. Well, I can imagine that Siddhartha was sitting somewhere, perhaps practicing, and stood up to perhaps go meet his friends. And in standing up, he discovered that his body was too weak to carry him. I can imagine him thinking to himself, "Oh no, I've pushed my body too far. I can't even get up to walk." Uh, and at that time, a young maiden, perhaps a farm girl, was walking by and saw him struggling. And she came over and said, "Can I help you?" And he again admitted to this young woman, "I've pushed my body too far. I haven't eaten. I feel very weak." So she asked him to stay still. She went to her cottage, uh, came up with some milk and rice porridge, brought it back to him, and offered it to him so he could nourish himself. after seeing him kind of come back to himself and his body being nourished, she left. And I guess he could realize for himself that for some reason, neither one of those extremes of excess and luxury or of denial were the answer. Perhaps there was a middle way. So he decided that afternoon to sit until he could achieve an understanding, a clear understanding of why he began his journey and perhaps what suffering was and perhaps how to live in the middle way. In the morning, I guess he awakened. Yes, this is the answer. This is the answer. So I guess in the early morning light, he got up to perhaps rejoin his friends, and he came upon a traveler who looked at him as he was coming down the path and there's something different about this guy. He seems kind of radiant. And he asked him, "Sir, you look, there's something different about you. Are you a god?" And the Buddha looked at the traveler and said, "No, I am awake." Now, um, awake. Awake from what? Now, we use that word in our practice. Awaken. We also use the word liberation. Liberation from what? Another word we use is refuge. Taking refuge in this practice, finding refuge in this practice of ours. Refuge from what? Uh, in our temple, we chant the three refuges. I noticed earlier in the Sweet Nectar service that you were chanting it as well. Uh, in English, it goes, "I go to Buddha, innate wisdom and compassion as my refuge. I go to Dharma, teachings manifesting everywhere as my refuge. I go to Sangha, the community of all beings, as my refuge." Refuge. Our practice is to take us towards refuge, towards liberation, to awaken. So after the Buddha passed the traveler, he went to go find his fellow ascetics, the five spiritual seekers that were practicing with him, because he wanted to share his insight. And I believe that that sharing is where we get the first Dharma talk, uh, the Four Noble Truths. So I just wanted to share with you that that's one of the readings or texts, passages that I turn to every once in a while to kind of see what's there, I guess you could say. The Four Noble Truths read the Noble Truth of Suffering. That's the first one. The second, the Noble Truth of the Origins of Suffering. The third one is the Noble Truth of the Cessation of Suffering. The fourth one is the Noble Truth of the Way leading to the cessation of suffering. The Four Noble Truths. The list that I just read to you is Ajahn Sumedho's wording. I imagine there's different wordings from different traditions, different teachers, but you get the idea. Uh, to touch quickly on the first one, the noble truth of suffering. Uh, I think that is helpful because I've met people who seem lost in their suffering or trapped. And I think sometimes that suffering is related to the understanding that it is only happening to them. And so this truth, this first truth, kind of points to that we as human beings will experience suffering or dissatisfaction in our lives. It's nothing personal happening to us. It is part of our human condition. And that's okay, as long as we use this practice of ours to hopefully no longer cause any more harm to ourselves or to others. So when we understand that the first noble truth, that there is suffering, we know that we're not alone, that this is the way things are, and that in itself can be a relief, I think, for people. Suffering. I want to move on to the last one, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And that way, the middle way, the way that we follow as practitioners, is the Noble Eightfold Path, which is connected or attached to the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So I'm going to list those eight, the Eightfold Path. This is not an in depth study. I just want to kind of familiarize us, touch it again, look at it. I ask you to look at it for yourselves to see what's there for you. So, to get to the Noble Eightfold Path, it's divided into three sections. The first section, wisdom, prajna, is composed of right view and right intention. This is the path leading to the ending of suffering. Wisdom, right view, right intention. The second grouping is morality, sila, right speech, right action, right livelihood. The third and final is concentration, or samadhi, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Those are interesting categories: wisdom, morality, concentration. Kind of the foundation of our practice and things to kind of keep in mind as we practice. And we're not going to go into any depths except for to one of them, which is right effort, zazen practice. I mentioned to you earlier how special it is to sit with you, to sit with oneself. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the facilitator for our One Sangha program for people who want to uh, go deeper in their practice. And for me, going deeper in your practice means practicing regularly, not just on special occasions. And so we practice and we do some reading, we talk, but the basic premise is by the end of the 9 months, you're not just sitting on holidays, you're practicing on a regular basis and you've become comfortable in it. When you have difficulty, you still stick with it. You appreciate it. You begin to understand that you do this to take care of your life. And in so taking care of your life, you take care of others, your community, your loved ones, the strangers in the street. By practicing sitting still. So simple, and yet there's such a great depth there, a depth that cannot be captured in words, ever. And if it cannot be captured in words, that means you have to discover what it means and the depths of it for yourself. No one can do it for you. Not 1,000 Dharma talks, not 1,000 books. You must sit still and look deeply into what it means to be a human being living in this moment. So when we sit, we cultivate a couple of things. One is called shamatha, peaceful abiding. I think just being able to sit still and breathe is a tremendous skill. It also helps us to be able to look with some sort of clarity and depth into this investigation of life, our life, our connection. It is kind of like looking into a pond. If the sediment is stirred up, you cannot see the bottom clearly. But if we stop stirring it around and just let it sit, the sediment sinks to the bottom. We can see through the water with greater clarity and with greater depth. And that would lead us to another element of sitting, zazen, vipassana, which I understand as insight. We can glimpse these truths that help us to live our lives, that help us to follow a path that cultivates within us the three categories of the Eightfold Noble Path: wisdom, morality, causing no harm, as little harm as possible anyway, to ourselves and to others, and concentration, mindfulness, the drive to maintain this practice for the good of ourselves and the good of all beings. This is kind of why I like to go back to uh, the Four Noble Truths to see what's there for me. I invite you to take a look for yourself and see what's there for you. So I'd like to close by reading from the book that we are reading from in the One Sangha program. It's Thomas Cleary's interpretation of some ancient teachers' encouragements to practice Zazen. This one is from Zen Master Dogen. The title seems to be A Generally Recommended Mode of Sitting Meditation. I'm just going to read a few paragraphs with you, and thank you for your attention. The way is fundamentally complete and perfect, all pervasive. How could it depend on cultivation and realization? The vehicle of the source is free. Why expend effort? The whole being is utterly beyond defiling dust. Who would believe in a method of wiping it clean? The great whole is not apart from here. Why go someplace to practice? Nevertheless, the slightest discrepancy is as the distance between sky and earth. As soon as aversion, and attraction arise, you lose your mind in confusion. Even though you may boast of comprehension and wallow in understanding, having gotten a glimpse of insight, and though you find the way and understand the mind, inspired with the determination to soar the skies, although you may roam freely within the bounds of initial entry, you are still somewhat lacking in a living road of emancipation. Even Gautama Buddha, who had innate knowledge, sat upright for 6 years. This is a noteworthy example. When referring to the transmission of the mind seal at Shaolin, the fame of 9 years facing a wall is still mentioned. Since the ancients do so, why should people today not do so? Thank you very much for having me.